I have the pleasure to be joined by Steve Tanner, who is running for Idaho House of Representatives in District 13, Seat B. So, without further ado, Mr. Tanner, what brings you here? What's your journey that brought you to the point where you're standing for public office?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think just generally speaking, just broad picture, just feeling that our republic is in peril. That there's a lot of just a feeling of shakiness in our society. I think more specifically, what happened back in you know in response to COVID 2020 and and afterwards. Um, just seeing how people's rights were trampled on. Even here in Idaho, wouldn't expect that, in Idaho, but that happened here. And that's when I really felt like I have to start acting. I have to be part of the solution. I can't just stand by and complain.
So, what's in your background? What did you do for a living? Have you lived in Idaho all your life? What perspective are you bringing to the table here?
So no, I haven't lived in Idaho all my life. Actually, I grew up a Navy brat. My father was in the U.S. Navy, 36 years. He went in as a Navy corpsman during World War II. He participated in the invasion on Okinawa and stayed in the Navy for 36 years and retired as a captain. So we moved around, my whole childhood. I think I went to about 9 different schools, including living back east for a little while. We lived in Philadelphia, also in Maryland, and then we went out to the Philippines. We were out there in Subic Bay for 2 years, and came back to the States. Stayed mainly in California after that, and that's where I stayed until coming to Idaho. Almost it'll be 8 years in September.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and what I do, I'm a database programmer analyst. I've worked for companies large and small. I've worked for AT&T, Bank of America, Countrywide. When I was with Bank of America, I was on the mortgage side, and Blue Cross of Idaho, and Latham and Watkins Law Firm, which is a very large international firm now. So that's my employment history. And also, I also on the side, I went back to school, got my Master of Divinity from Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. My wife and I, we planted a small church in California, and we ran that for almost 6 years.
oh.
Yeah.
It's an interesting combination of skill sets. Scott Adams, the guy who draws Dilbert, he talks about putting together talent stacks where you have one talent from one field, one talent from another field, then you put it together, and now you have a unique set of talents that you can apply to different jobs. Coming from, database programming, I've known database programmers. I've dabbled in
Mhm.
it myself a little bit. You're going to look at things very organized in a very organized way. But then, working with people, in the context of being a pastor, that's people are not organized and
No.
rational. It's
No. Yeah, not
people are
rational.
people.
Yeah, I
So
think that's my take on human nature is, we like to think that we're rational, but we're not so much.
yeah. So how do you bring those, that perspective, to the art or science or chaos of legislating?
Well, I think it plays nicely into legislating in the sense that, I'm used to analyzing. I'm used to like digging and uh, putting things in an order, in a structure that's functional. Because I'm a programmer. And I think as far as that goes, that works. That's a pretty easy transfer. And then also, working with people. I love working with people. I love talking with people. Um, I'm doing a lot of door knocking right now, and I'm really having fun. I'm really enjoying it. I'm just meeting all kinds of different people and hearing their concerns. So that's something I really enjoy doing. Just hearing about different people in their various locations in life, or and stations in life, uh, and what they're dealing with, and so I'm feel like I'm gaining a wealth of information, to bring into this. I think if I do get elected, I will continue doing this. I know I think it's Senator Trakel mentioned at a meeting recently that he holds town halls once a month. I think that's a great idea. I think that is, fantastic. I'm also very active in District 13, in the Republican Party in district. I'm a precinct committee man now. I'm secretary for the district. So you know, uh, I'm a uh, very active in communicating with the people in our district, trying to draw them in, trying to pull them into the process. And if I get elected, or even if I don't, I will continue to work with District 13 to develop, our party here locally.
Well, I'm secretary for District 14, so that's something we
All
have in
right.
common.
Okay.
So, as you've been going around and knocking on doors and talking to people, doing meetings and such, what are you hearing from your voters? What are the issues that are important to them, and what are their priorities right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. So my first question to them, for those who take the time to talk, not everybody, of course, will take a whole lot of time to talk. But I ask people, just thinking in terms of Idaho, not national news, because everybody wants to go there. They want to talk about everything that's happening in Washington and, no, and internationally. And I just ask them, say, just focus on Idaho. What are your big concerns? And what I'm hearing, I'm getting various feedback. I mean, the local expansion is one thing, just, you know, especially here in Nampa, with all the building that's going on out here. Um, Big concerns about infrastructure. Of course, those are more city issues. Uh, but that's something that falls off everybody's lips right away. But I think the other big issues are, education is a big issue. A lot of people are very concerned about what's happening down at the border. The border security is another big issue. But what I'm also reading in people, Brian, is a lot of apathy. Just they're, when I'm talking with them, even though they're talking with me, there's apathy. I would even think, it's some disbelief that there are any real good solutions, that things could change. If they voted me in, or if they voted the next guy in, you know, what's really going to change? And that seems to be the real question, for people, because they just feel like it's whatever is happening in government is so far away from them that they really don't have much leverage over it. And that's one of the things that I'm doing is I'm trying to educate them. I'm always trying to talk with them and say, look, the solution to everything is for you to focus right here and become active in the process. I mean, that's our first way to change. I just had this conversation with my son this morning. We're talking about this, like this is the first line of solution, is to get involved locally, and know who the players are, know what the issues are, become educated about them, and then educate other people, and vote accordingly. A great example of that here in Nampa. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's the city a while back passed they gave a permit to a cement mixing company out of Utah, and the place where that they allowed them to get the permit for is right next to the airport here in Nampa. But what's bad about that is that it's also right across the street from about 3 or 4 subdivisions. In fact, it's just surrounded in just about every direction other than the airport by subdivisions. And once people found out about it, they really got up in arms, because cement dust is very toxic, and you can get very sick from that. And if that gets in the soil, I mean, it gets in your garden, it will ruin the composition of your garden and everything. Um, so people got very animated about that, and they were out going door to door, getting people to sign a petition. They went to the city council planning and zoning meeting with like about 300 people, that went there. And then about a month later, the city council, had to decide whether or not to renew the permit again. 200 to 300 people showed up, and the city council looked at this, sea of humans out there, angry about the fact that there's, about the possibility of the cement plant, coming in, and the city council voted 6-0 against it, because they saw, these people are educated, they know what's going on, and they're upset about it. And if we vote against the people, then we'll be out of here. And so that's what I want to encourage, that vision of government, citizen involvement.
Ideally, if you vote against the people, you'd be out. One
Well,
thing I've noticed is that there's a couple of districts where it really seems like incumbent representatives are out of step with most voters in their district, but due to various factors, they end up winning the race. And so I'm going to come straight to your race here. The incumbent, he won a three-way race 2 years ago with less than a majority of the vote,
right.
and now you once again have a three-way race. So it's it's a tough situation, no matter who
Mhm.
you are. How do you stand out in a more crowded field like that? Because you not only have to talk to voters and say, here's why I'm a better choice than your current representative, but also here's why I'm a better choice than the other challenger. So
Yeah.
how do you you know put yourself forward like that?
Well, I think in this race in particular, yeah, the clear difference between the incumbent and myself is I'm conservative, and I think it's been evident by the incumbent's voting record that he's really not. Uh, I think you're well aware of Idaho Freedom Foundation, has rated him with a triple F. The Institute of Legislative Analysis, I think, rated him as a Democrat. They categorized him as philosophically a Democrat. And also, if you look at his Sunshine Report, he's who he's funded by, who's supporting him are corporations and PACs. Um, and I think it only has like one or two personal donations, and those are small and very late. So we can see, just by that cursory look, that there's a big difference between he and myself. We stand apart on various issues. Just like in education, for example, he voted against 710, the library bill. I would have been in favor of that, even though I don't think it's a real strong bill. Um, the bill to provide a tax credit, for parents that want to send their kids to maybe a charter school or private school. We're on opposite sides of the fence on that. I believe in a plurality of uh, solutions, for education, whereas, he believes in a one size fits all public school system. Um, and So, we stand apart on issues like that. I'm endorsed also. I think another thing that where I stand apart from both candidates is that I'm endorsed by our district. I have worked closely with our district. I'm endorsed by them, and I continue to work closely with them. And so I I think that's the promise of the future, for this race. The incumbent's not going to be working closely with us, and I don't feel like the other candidate has that position as well.
So assuming you win, you get to go into the legislature, you're come up there in December to vote for leadership and select your committees. Where would you like to focus? What committees, what issues, what bills would you have in your pocket ready to go?
Yeah, I probably the immediate. My thought is, state affairs would probably be, um, the easiest or the most natural fit, for me, considering my interests. My interests are, well, election integrity is a big one. Um, uh, I've mentioned, some of the issues regarding education. I really think that, for instance, yeah, we did get 710 through the library bill. It did get through this year. I think it needs to be strengthened. There needs to be a little more teeth in it. Um, and um, And then taxes. I think taxes, people, that's the other thing I've seen as I'm out talking with people. People are just tapped out. They're worried, You know, the other big response that I'm getting from people in the district is that they're very concerned about the economy. And we have here in Nampa, we have several bonds and levies that are in the air that'll be on the ballot, coming up. So I think we need to find more ways to provide tax relief. I'm all for, making government smaller and cut spending, but I think taxes is a big issue. For example, a grocery tax. Why do we still have a grocery tax? I think we're what, one of 6 states in the whole country that have a grocery tax. And we live in the middle of agriculture. Why are we doing this? And why are we feeding all this tax money to the state? And I know people say, well, they get a credit. It's like, well, what's happening with that money in the meantime? From the time they collect it and until the time they give us a credit, where's that money going? What's happening with it? Why, and are we getting, does it work out the same as if we had no tax at all? Is net net, especially now with inflation, you know, uh, 6% of $10, is a lot less than 6% of $100. So with inflation, that property tax, it costs more. Or excuse me, of the grocery tax, that costs more. With the property tax, I would like to see seniors 65 and older be able to graduate out of having to pay for any kind of school bonds. That's something else I would come in with.
Would that then, though, shift the tax burden for those bonds onto other families?
Other families or other uses, maybe you make it up in use taxes.
Property taxes is such a complex issue. Everybody's concerned about it, because obviously, you're taxed on your house, which is one, you need a house to live in. So you're either paying that through directly or you're paying it into your rent. Uh, Houses appreciate over time, but you don't necessarily get more money over time. So, they can take more money. Um, and and yet it's such a complex issue because there are so many taxing districts that have, can levy property taxes: cities, counties, school districts, library districts, fire districts, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, they did House Bill 292 last year, and then this year the
Right,
governor's school funding bill
right.
shifted some property tax, or in theory, some property tax over to sales tax. What else could the legislature do at this point to, relieve that burden?
Well, like I said, let's start to consider, some obvious things, speaking about property tax in particular, like I said, like let's start to maybe for people that are seniors that, graduate them out, or create an algorithm, so that as they get older, they're paying less, in terms of a property tax, or maybe for the length of time that they've been in their home, then they're paying less. But I think it's unfair, especially, as for seniors who have, especially in regards to like school bonds. That's something they're not getting an immediate use out of, right? I mean, they're not being immediately helped by that. Whereas you could argue, uh, you know, as they get older, an increased, bond for the ambulance service, might make more sense for seniors, but not for, not for uh, school bonds, right?
Speaking of schools, that's
Yeah.
also a contentious issue lately. Uh, obviously, our Constitution says we have to provide a free and uniform public school system,
Um,
but obviously, our public school system as it is, it never has enough money. Students are not doing well. The average, number that are passing the various state tests is abysmally low. There's all sorts of, leftist indoctrination. We all know that. So,
mhm.
you know, I guess a two-part question then: how would you improve the public school system? And also, what sort of school choice measures might you support? Obviously, 2 years ago, or last year actually, they had the education savings account that died on the Senate floor. This year, they had a tax credit idea that did not get out of committee. So, whereas other states are doing, programs to allow money to follow the children, Idaho, it's been a tough sell here so far.
Mhm. Yeah, I like the tax idea. I like the tax credit idea. I think it's easy to manage. It's one of the things that really surprised me is one of the arguments against it, that it would be difficult to manage and to track. I mean, it's a tax credit, you turn in your receipts just like you do anything else, for when you do your taxes at the end of the year. It doesn't require a whole new department to oversee it. It's just part of the mechanism that we already have in place. But I like the idea of parents being able to go, uh, have a tax credit so they can send their children to the best solution for their kids. Um, I don't. I don't understand. Again, also with public schools, like you mentioned, performance is, abysmal. And in my school district right here in Nampa School District, the last I looked, which was probably not so many months ago, at uh, the website for superintendent schools, um, that shows you the performance of each of the districts. Uh, Nampa School District college readiness rate was 19%. Math proficiency at 25%. Reading comprehension and writing, I think it was in the 40 some percent. And just being able to read at grade level was around 60%. So, at that performance, we have to ask ourselves, are we really getting what we're paying for? We continue to throw in all this money. I think, what was it last year? Um, there was a top of what we already allocate to schools. The governor asked for another 300 million,
I,
which was
I
given
don't
to them.
remember exactly, but it was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, yeah, that we added onto them. And the argument still is we need more money for our schools. If it's, and you hear this just in neighborhood chatter when you talk with people, oh, if it's for the kids, it's for the schools. Yeah, let's add more money. And it's just more money, more money, more money. But proficiency, they're not getting the job done. It's simply not getting it done. So we have to ask ourselves, do we want, like you have a car, that after so many years. I mean, you have to decide, do I really want to put more money into this or do I want to do something different? So I think that's kind of where we're at with public schools.
The incumbent in this race is very much a supporter of the public school system and has resisted
Yeah.
any efforts to have money follow the child. I was going back in preparation for this, and I was looking at the debate in the House Rev and Tax Committee about the tax credit, and he was the one who was actually taking point on opposing it.
Hmm.
And for that, he's got billboards in your community from
Hmm.
or pro public school organizations thanking him for that. So it's where do you think your neighbors and people in Nampa fall on this issue? Are they looking for some sort of way of money following the student, or are they worried about public schools being defunded?
Well, it's across the spectrum. It's a continuum. Yeah, I remember him in committee. I think he asked the question, where's the money going to come from? Well, it's a tax credit, you know, but um, my view on this is, and I've heard people say this, that we shouldn't be using quote unquote, government money to be paying parents to send their kids to other schools. No, it's not government money, it's taxpayer money, and we, the people, decide where we want that money to go, and how we want to use it for education. So that's just kind of my view on, how we allocate the money. But yes, you're correct. He does have billboards here in Nampa, paid for by a organization called Save Our Schools Idaho. If you go and look at their website, it's very left leaning. It's public schools only, um, sort of organization. It says that he's a champion for schools and children, but that's code for public schools and teachers unions, So I yeah, that's a big difference between us.
The whole public school, you know, um, money
Well,
following the student argument or debate. It's really weird to me because of all the things that the Republican Party as a whole has stood for over the years, it's that the private sector does things better than the government.
yeah.
And yet here's an issue where a lot of Republicans, you talk about, school choice and they get very defensive. Oh no, don't touch my public schools. What's going on here?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I think that's why, the Institute of Legislative Analysis rated him philosophically a Democrat, because that's a one size fits all, top down, solution for education. You know, I don't understand. I think it has to do with the influence that the teachers unions have.
So you're in the legislature, January 2025. You've got some sort of school choice bill or whatever. Maybe it's concealed carry for teachers, which passed the
Mhm.
House this year, but got stuck in a Senate drawer. And you've got the teachers unions coming after you. You've got Save Our Schools Idaho coming after you. You've got the lobbyists coming after you. Um, how do you fight back? How do you maintain, your own principles, and how do you stay grounded with your constituents?
Well, and that let me go back because I didn't answer the second part of your question earlier, which plays into that. What I'm hearing in my community
Oh,
about schools, uh, it's really like I say, it's a continuum. It's anywhere from you know uh, grandmothers and grandfathers saying, yeah, we need to do whatever we can for the public schools, and they don't see any other kind of solution as being workable because they're not used to that. They hadn't seen that in their lifetime much. Uh, Even myself growing up, you know, I remember when homeschooling was a brand new idea, you know. So it's most a lot of people have not given a whole lot of thought to an education framework outside the public school system. Then on the other hand, I knock on a door and a lady answers and she's got three kids wrapped around her ankles, or in the background running around screaming, and briefly get into the topic of education or again, I go back to that question, what's your big concern for Idaho? And she responds, well, I'm homeschooling five kids, so she's taking her kids out of the school system. You know, I've run into that many times. So uh, to answer that question, um, it's along a continuum. So the way that I would respond is that I think we need a plurality of solutions for education. And I'm firm in that. That's something that I don't think I could be persuaded away from. One of the arguments that I hear about, like, for instance, the tax credit, that it would take money away, or the voucher or education savings, whatever. It would take money away from the public school system, right? And that would especially hurt the rural schools, you know, that because education in the rural communities is different than education here. Well, you can say that in the public schools. If it's just different, then how is it that just one solution is the best solution? It's kind of a silly argument.
it's interesting. During that same debate I mentioned on the tax credit, there was a father from somewhere up north, Emmett maybe, who testified about what he did to make sure that his children had a quality education, which meant not the public school system,
Yeah.
and the sacrifices that he was making, and it was good. Unfortunately, the committee was not willing to listen. Um,
It is, and doesn't that kind of indicate, a lack of trust in people, that people really, know what's best for them? And why don't we release people to do what's best for them? Why do we have to have a top-down design that, that's government enforced for everybody?
yeah, I mean that's the biggest argument against school choice is that, well, we need accountability. Now, that
Yeah.
which begs the question: are public schools being held accountable now?
Oh, exactly. You can say the same thing in public schools. Yeah.
So, moving issues. How about guns?
Yeah.
That's obviously everybody in Idaho, even the Democrats, say that they support the Second Amendment and your right to carry a firearm. I remember when Paulette Jordan was running for one of her offices, she released an ad, shooting a rifle. So everybody says they're for guns, but then the devil's in the details,
Mhm.
and questions about red flag laws. Can the
Mhm.
government come in and take your firearms if your neighbors or friends or family think you're a danger to yourself or others? Background checks, various restrictions on ammunition or accessories, things like that. What's your thoughts on that issue?
Well, Idaho's a constitutional carry state, and I want to keep it that way. Um, and as far as red flag laws, let me state clearly, because this is a big issue in my community and in my race. Because I think there's been some misunderstanding. I do not support red flag laws. And the main reason why I don't support them is because they don't provide due process. Right now, I understand that there are people that have mental health issues, that there are, people that, um, you know, that could, that are problematic, but we need to find other solutions for them. But red flag laws are not the solution.
I Before I moved out here 6 years ago from Washington,
Mhm.
and I remember talking to someone who was gathering signatures to put an initiative on the ballot to institute red flag laws.
Mhm.
And that was my argument. There's no due process here. You have the government coming in and seizing your personal property, which the Constitution says you're allowed to have, and the
Yeah,
government cannot infringe upon that. And they're going to do it with no due process.
right.
And he was, you know, from a more urban setting, was talking about, well, you wouldn't say that if you knew what I knew, if you'd seen people murdered because someone, a domestic abuser had access to firearms, or somebody with mental health issues. And I don't know, there's a lot of issues in our society that it's hard to apply equally in all situations. But I mean, infringed infringe means infringed. Shall not infringe means shall not infringe. So uh,
Right.
you're right. We have to find other solutions that don't actually infringe upon your literal constitutional rights.
Right, right. That doesn't give government or any policing body the power to just come into your home without due process and just take away the right to defend yourself.
So, what do you think about health freedom issues? There were a couple bills that went through the legislature this year. Unfortunately, they didn't go all the way through. A bill banning mask mandates passed the House, was stuck in a drawer in the Senate, and a bill restricting the powers of health districts was killed in a Senate committee.
Yeah.
Um, you know, what are your thoughts on that? And more broadly, what do you do with the whole fallout from COVID? A lot of people want justice done for what government agencies did to us, shut us down, shut down our churches, our schools, our businesses, while other people just want to move on, pretend it never happened. Where's the balance there?
Yeah, we have to protect our civil liberties. I mean, government doesn't own us. They don't have the right to just shut us down, take away our livelihoods, take away our right to meet peaceably and assemble together to worship. I think what happened up in Moscow, a few years ago, with those people that were worshiping outside their church, they were outside, Brian, socially distanced, and they were arrested. And I just think that's so egregious. That can never happen again. Can never happen again. The same thing with the mask mandates. Now, looking back on it, we know that the masks didn't do anything. If anything, they probably caused more disease. You know, and so we absolutely have to draw a firm line around our freedoms and say, no, you can't cross these.
Yeah. It seems like even within the Republican Party, there's a debate over the role of government. You know, Traditionally, conservatives saw the government as something that needed to be limited, and that's how the Constitution was written.
Yeah.
These are the powers of the government, and anything else that's not actually written here, you don't actually have the power to do. But now we have people who say, well, there are things the government can do, and the government's involved in so many things in Idaho. We have so many commissions and agencies and divisions and departments. They're involved in education and food production. Uh, you know, they're allowing
It's
cities to impose mask mandates. How do we go restoring government to its proper scope?
Well, let's talk about, what government is really for. I think, the vision of a lot of people right now, and I think it's kind of something very subtle that's, creeping in from the left, is that the role of government is to make the world safe, for citizens. Is that really the role of government, to make the world safe? No, I don't think it is. The role of government is very limited. It's to establish a rule of law so that you and I can engage in commerce and engage in and meeting, and in order to uh, develop wealth and for ourselves and for our children, and to buy property. But it's so we can engage with each other freely in order to improve ourselves, improve our lives, and also to preserve our freedoms. The role of government is not to make everybody safe, because if the role of government is to make everybody safe, then government can trample over all of our rights.
Mhm.
And I think we could need to say out loud, that's not the purpose of government. But it's kind of almost like an unspoken thing now, especially from the left. And you hear this, from we're getting this from the college and the universities. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And it's like, the society is supposed to make everybody feel safe, and that's the role of government. No.
Yeah, I remember right after 9/11 with the Patriot Act. I'm old enough to remember that. The It was the left who was saying that we shouldn't be giving up our liberty for in exchange for security. But
Interesting.
then many of those same people, when COVID came around, were fully supportive of all the lockdowns, which
Yeah.
I mean, I can't explain why, but that seems to be the case. You need government to come in and take care of you.
Right.
So, kind of on a flip side of that is, I'd say, the relationship between conservatives and businesses. Going back to the Reagan era, it was always a Republican idea that we support business and we want to curtail government because the private sector does things better, free enterprise, capitalism.
Mhm.
Now there's kind of a divide there. If you look over on the primary polls on gemstatechronicle.com, you see the endorsements of various candidates. And there's really not much overlap between candidates who are endorsed by IACI, the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, and the ones who are endorsed by the conservative liberty organizations.
Mhm.
So, and IACI, even this year, they've endorsed some Democrats as well. So I guess I've been asking a lot of folks this. How
Yeah.
did this happen where conservatives and business got on completely different tracks? And what should be the role of government with business?
Well, I think what I understand is that business became um, I don't know how to really say this, but large businesses, somehow acquired the right, to have more leverage over government than small businesses. And I think what we really they do a lot of things great. Large businesses do a lot of things great. I work for a large business, and they do a great job of what they're doing. But um, we have to maintain the room, maintain the space, for small businesses to compete. And we can't allow the over influence of large businesses in politics. Um, I've had some really interesting conversations. In fact, I had to have some repair done on my roof uh, because of this last winter, all the winds and everything was blowing tiles off my roof. So the roofer came over, and I just went over the other day and talked to him. And he's a small business owner, and he was talking about all the pressure that they're getting from large businesses wanting to come in and buy them out. We have to keep that space, where small businesses can compete meaningfully. I had another conversation with a gentleman, and he came out the door and sat down with me, and he said, "I just became poor today." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I just shut down my business." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, uh, after COVID, we got all this money coming in from the federal government, and people were somehow found ways to just stay home and not work anymore. And as uh, businesses, even large chain businesses were having trouble finding employees. And then all of a sudden now McDonald's is paying 18, $19 an hour, you know, uh, that kind of thing going on." And he said, "Well, what happened for me was then my employees came to me and said, uh, how come we're working for you? We're only making 10, $12 an hour. I could go to McDonald's and make 19." And he said, "But I couldn't go back to, companies or in contracts that I was working on because, I had signed those contracts 2 years ago, so I couldn't go and, say, hey, can we change this? He says, so eventually what I had to do, had to end up paying my people, and just in order to keep them and so that I could complete the contract. He said, but once the contract was over, I realized I couldn't compete anymore. And he said it just decided to close.
It really
So
does seem like the end result of the lockdowns is going to be the consolidation of businesses into just a few giant corporations.
yeah, and it speaks to another issue too, like where a lot of this money comes from. It comes from, federal level, straight into our communities, like what happened here. It hollows out the middle class, right? It shuts down small businesses. They can't compete with the big box stores, the big companies.
Earlier, you mentioned the sunshine reports, and I brought them up here on my other screen. It really is maybe the biggest distinction I've yet seen in any race. You've raised 14,000 as of the last report, 14,000 from people and $767.57 from a company, whereas the incumbent has raised $9,550 from companies and 150 from a person. That's for better or for worse. The big corporations and companies and associations in Idaho, they want a seat at the table, and they're willing to spend a lot of money to make sure that they are at that table.
Mhm.
So what are regular people to do?
It's in what sense? What do you mean? What are regular people to do?
How are regular people supposed to compete with that? How are regular people supposed to get representation? Uh,
Right. Yeah,
you know,
because they're putting in so much money, they're giving candidates a lot of money. Yeah. This is our the predicament of our country right now, the politics in our country, is we have to the people have to wake up. The people have to get involved, and they have to uh be willing to donate, to get involved, pick the best candidates, donate to them so that we can compete in the political process. But we want people to go into the legislature not owing anything to any corporation or political action committee, right? We want them free of that.
yeah, I
So
mean, the ideal is that you're representing your constituents.
that's the whole point, right?
But I know once you get in that building, you're subjected to a lot of pressure, a lot of information. I mean, lobbyists aren't necessarily bad people, but they have their agenda, and they're going to come and tell you why you should vote a certain way. And it really is. I said this in my speech to a Lincoln Day dinner recently. It's up to the people to keep their representatives on track. If you're not emailing them and calling them and talking to them at town halls, then you can't really complain when they just do what the lobbyists want them to do.
Yeah. There's a senator who's in office right now, and I have tremendous respect for her. She told me once about how she was approached by lobbyists, and I liked her response to the lobbyists. And what she said to them is, so what you're really asking is you want government to be involved in your business. I thought that's a great way to answer that. Because if I, basically what she was saying is if I get involved, I'm going to be looking into looking at you very closely.
Well, and
Do
that's
you,
the thing. There's businesses and business associations that have made the financial calculation that it's cheaper for them in the long run to get some law passed, pay some lobbyists, donate to some PACs, donate directly to candidates, and you get things like, say, the launch grant, which
yeah,
then is money from the taxpayer going right back to those businesses.
right, right. I know and which, by the way, the incumbent supported and voted
Yeah.
for. And he voted, I think, a second time this year.
They voted to continue funding it this year.
Yeah.
Um, well, I appreciate your time. We've been talking for quite a while. Is there anything that we've missed? Anything you want to cover, or just final closing thoughts?
Um, I think the choice in this race is clear. I think I am the conservative in this race, and I am I've been active in the GOP here in District 13 on the ground, um, and I'm part of this process. I'm not a new player that's come in. I'm not somebody who's not directly involved in the process here. I'm not running out on my own, but I'm known. I'm somebody that people know. and have worked with for the past few years, and they've endorsed me, and um, I think that's something to know about me. And like you pointed out, just in your look at the Sunshine Report, I'm funded by individuals. That's who I want to represent.
Steve Tanner, running for House of Representatives, District 13, Seat B. Thank you.
All right, Brian, thank you.